Okay, so today I'm back in the Star Sports Mayfair office with David Hipkin. Thanks very much, David, for agreeing to come on and talk to us. Now, to put things in perspective, you've made money betting on boxing and tennis, succeeded at poker and card counting blackjack. Is there an edge to be found or a profit to be made on pretty much everything if you look hard enough?
I wish I could say yes. I wish I could say I've been tremendously successful at all of those things. I've certainly tried them all. I'm the sort of person that when I believes an edge can be had, I want to try and find that myself. You can read all you like, but if you're learning to swim, you've got to get in the water. So I'm a big advocate for trying these things, knowing if there is an edge and pursuing it, and knowing if there isn't an edge and quitting at the right time. So I think there are edges to be had. Sometimes they're theoretical edges rather than practical edges. And I've certainly got experiences of exploiting a theoretical edge, but it not ending in success because practically it was too much of a challenge.
Okay, now you've got quite an academic background, which we'll talk about as we go through the interview, but being mathematical and analytical, do some sports lend themselves to your style of betting more than others?
Definitely, yes. So the main sports that I'm interested in are boxing at one end of the spectrum and football at the other. And I think those are two very extreme sports to bet on. So the football approach, for me at least, is entirely data driven. So I don't have an opinion on a football match I'm betting on. I follow the data, I follow the system, and I don't give it a human input. With the boxing, it's the opposite. There is really no data. In football, you've got average goals and home away advantage. In boxing, A may beat B and B might beat C, but that doesn't mean C can't beat A. So there's no sort of form line in that regard. You need the fundamentals of understanding the sport, but for the boxing side of things, I do a lot of sort of subjective, independent kind of feel pricing around it. So that I quite like the fact that I've got those two ends covered: the very data-driven approach at football, and then the very non-data-driven approach with boxing. And then there's things in between, the tennis and so on.
Okay, now I've seen a video of you recently doing 27, I think, pull-ups.
Right.
So are you sort of a boxer or a footballer?
No. I during lockdown, I'm a gym goer. During lockdown, I bought a pull-up bar for the garden, and I did 5,000 pull-ups during the year. I used to climb rope as well. I was a big rope, so it's kind of just a fun thing I do at the gym.
Okay, I was just wondering if, being an athletic sort of person gives you any sort of edge in analysing boxing and that sort of thing.
I would say absolutely not. No, there are. Yeah, no. I mean that's a short answer. I don't think it's a factor at all.
Okay, so what was the key to your success analysing? Let's talk about boxing.
Yeah, so the boxing, I think it's a brilliant sport for not only talking points in pubs and gyms and everywhere, but you have to have a fundamental understanding about the mechanics of the sport. So you've got two boxers here. What does one do well? What does one do badly? How do they match? But that's great. You have to have that fundamental baseline for making your prediction. But there are loads of things on top of that I will add that will give me confidence about how strongly I feel about an upcoming fight. So I'm going to rattle through some of these things. The first thing is the wisdom of the crowd does not apply in boxing. So wisdom of the crowd is a great phenomenon. It was discovered about 120 years ago. I'm sure you've had people talk about it before, but 120 years ago, there was a village fair and there was a competition where members of the public were asked to estimate how much an ox weighed, and if the closest they got would win that ox. And an economist was watching this, and he saw that after 800 guesses, that crowd had got the ox's weight accurate to within 1%. So the wisdom of this crowd about a subject that they don't know anything about was more accurate than one expert farmer who couldn't estimate so accurately. So it's a brilliant sort of interesting thing to look at, but in boxing, it doesn't apply because the crowd in boxing is so heavily influenced by who they want to win, not who they think is going to win, and they're influenced by the media telling them who is likely to win rather than who is likely to win. So for me, my crowd is three people, not the thousands who are betting on exchange or talking in the media. It's three people. If I get a phone call from Mark and a text from Gary and an email from Johnny, and all three of those people are independently in agreement with what I think is going to happen in this fight, that for me is time to increase my bet, independently coming to the same conclusion. Then, so I'm looking for all of these things. So it's not just that. Then it's like, right, southpaw versus orthodox is a massive thing in boxing more than other sports. You've got 10% of the population are left-handed, so that means 20% of boxing matches will involve a left-handed, a southpaw fighter. The difference of the power coming from the other side to an orthodox fighter is with muscle memory and the training, is incredibly important. Tyson Fury is not effective against southpaws compared to orthodox fighters. He's now fought about 50 rounds against southpaws. He's never even scored a 10-8 round, let alone scored a knockdown. And yet in the build-up to the rematch, a lot of people were picking him to score a knockout over Usyk, who's one of the best southpaws there's ever been. So I just thought there's no way he was getting that stoppage over Usyk. Then there is the matchmaking in boxing. So these are all sort of subjective things. The matchmaking in boxing is huge. So you have a name fighter on the slide versus an up-and-coming fighter, and it's billed as a close betting fight, but it's not. The name fighter is on the slide. He's there to put his name to the promotion to boost the record of the up-and-coming fighter. Then I've got I really feel strongly about aging athletes, particularly in boxing. As soon as you turn 38, you can't make improvements. So there are exceptions where you still have active fighters in their late 30s who are incredibly good, but you can't be improving after 38. And it's literally, be it Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, there's a before and after 38 in their careers where you can literally see they were done. Then the final thing, so some fights, all these things are irrelevant, some fights, none of them are, but the final thing for me is what I call paddock watching. Some people call it armchair psychology, but you can, in boxing, because it is such a mental sport, you can see things in the fighters. They give away things that they're are not necessarily showing confidence, and I've often increased a bet because I've seen something in a boxer that doesn't give me confidence that they are thinking they're going to win.
Okay, your enthusiasm is palpable there for the boxing. But your first bet, you told me, was at a point-to-point. But your first serious bet was a boxing bet. We had 4 weeks pocket money on there. We better not really say that. So obviously these days you can have your pocket money on. Yeah. You described developing a healthy obsession with boxing and betting. Would that obsession be described as healthy these days?
Okay, so again, it's up to the individual, and for me, absolutely. I think the most important, biggest decisions I've made in my life, be it what type of mortgage to get, do I do this investment, do I quit this job, do I do this, do I speak to this person, have been about risk assessment, analysing the upside given relative downside. So completely healthy. I think to actually live those experiences as well is better than just sort of thinking about the theory behind it. I think the healthy element, you know, there are studies that show if you have just the act of having a bet, win or lose, will increase testosterone. So if you're a young man and you just have a little bet on your favourite football team, there are probably some health benefits there. It isn't all just this, we mustn't confuse risk-taking with recklessness. Now, there's another thing where some people have low serotonin levels, so they need something to boost their happiness, their well-being. The act of having a bet can do that. In moderation, it can do that. And if you take that away from an individual, they will find other outlets to get that serotonin boost, and it could be far less healthy things than having a little bet. So as long as under moderation, I think betting is an incredibly healthy thing to be doing. My parents encouraged me to do it at a young age. That bet I had as a teenager was on Lennox Lewis in 1993. I was a teenager. I had £20 on him to be undisputed champion that year. I went into a high street book. They weren't offering the market. I asked them for it, and they priced it up for me there and then, and it lost. But the idea that I could predict something in the future about my opinion of that event and be paid for it was fascinating. So, yes, I think it is a healthy obsession.
Well, just briefly, was horse racing ever a serious betting medium for you?
No. So my business partner has been a professional horse racing gambler for a long time. For me, no. I'll bet on the national and the big races, but no, never serious. Okay,
now you've made your business partner, I'm assuming you mean Chris Fawcett, who I've interviewed previously. You went to university to study psychology and statistics. So was the idea of working in the betting industry always in the back of your mind, or was it never really a thing?
No, so that was early, mid-90s. not even on my radar really. I wanted to be a criminal psychologist back then. I actually went for careers advice counselling. We had this thing where you go and be interviewed and take a psychometric test, and they told me that the best job for me was probably to be a lumberjack. So didn't do that. Perhaps down the line.
How did they come to that?
I have no idea. I imagine what my answers must have been for that to come out. So yeah,
You must have been okay.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? And then, so I did psychology at university, and then obviously university is kind of a transitional phase. You start university as a naive child, and you finish university as a naive adult, but you're still naive. And I didn't want to get into criminal psychology. I met someone at university who was involved in the betting industry. Back then, it still was there was no online betting. And so in the back of my mind, I was aware of it, but no, at that time, it was all about the psychology.
Okay, so when you came out of university, hopefully I got this right, you went into stockbroking,
Yeah.
which in my mind at least is just a more respectable, in inverted commas, form of gambling. So how did you get on with that?
Yeah, that was, you're told, you come out of university and you go and work in the city, you're told the world is your oyster. It was awful, I hated it. I did 6 months, it was the most, I think it was the Queen stockbroker, it was the oldest stockbroker in London, completely old school mentality. It was like being in a movie. I would have interviews to get a permanent role there, and it was like being in a banquet hall, and a maid would come in with tea and cake, and I was just performing a role of being this young up and coming person who wanted to work in the city, and it was exhausting. I hated it. The rat race, I was just stuck in that rat race as a 23-year-old, feeling older than I do now because of that environment. So as soon as there was an opportunity to get out, I took it.
I mean, was it the sort of the lure of £1 million bonuses and the cut and thrust something that you, or was that not available to you? That sort of.
At that stage, I was just a kid. No, so no, not even that. It was just it was more. Oh, this feels like the right thing to do. Let's go. Everyone goes from university to the city, or does this, does that. So it just felt like the right thing to do. And actually, at the time, coming straight out of university, I had some terrible jobs. I took a job anywhere. I was doing anything to just earn some money. And then when this prestigious role came up, I took it. But it didn't take me long to realise it wasn't for me.
So when you go back to when you had the losing bet in the betting shop, but you got, you sort of realised that your predictions were making money, did you follow that through your university career?
No, I'd still bet. Back then, again, it's brilliant thinking back on these times, because I didn't know what ROI was, return on investment. I didn't know what margin was, or overround, or variance. I didn't know any of these things. I just thought, right, you can bet and you can win, and it's great. How fun is that? So I would bet on the boxing still, and I would bet on the Grand National. I'd probably bet most at home with my parents. Of an evening, we'd pull out the cards, or we'd pull out the roulette wheel and have a little, fun bet with the family. So, but in terms of serious betting at university, absolutely no. It was recreational stuff.
Your parents had fun. I mean, they had a roulette table in the house.
Oh, it was. So my father and I, my mother was a mathematician. My father was a very good sportsman. So growing up in that environment, it was kind of inevitable that I would end up doing what I did. And my father, if there was nothing else to bet on, would bet on whether the person to walk past the street is male or female. So that was the sort of environment I was growing up in.